And then the situation completely transformed in France itself, because the king and queen moved out of Paris. They moved to Versailles, to one of their other palaces, which is just sort of a little bit out of Paris. And of course, what they were secretly trying to do was get another load of troops together to get rid of this parliament that they were having to work alongside, so they could just be king and queen with no one else interfering again. And there was this, what changed it, what sort of stopped them from doing that, there was a march of mostly women that went from Paris to Versailles, to the palace, and they forced the royal family to come. But this was where Marie Antoinette was supposed to have said, let them eat cake at this point. So she sort of was forced to come back with the king, back to Paris, and live in the palace in Paris again. So they weren't harmed or anything. They were still allowed to be in the palace in Paris. But the main thing about this was it transformed the whole way that women thought about themselves, because they were kept really low down in the pecking order of things in Catholic France, feudal Catholic France. But they completely changed the way they thought about it. So they started organising raids in shops where loads of these women would go into a shop and they would decide what they thought was a fair price for all the different goods and that. And they just go round the place, go, right, marmalade, that's going to be 89 pence, whatever it was, you know, that's going to be on special offer, 3 for 2, that you can win a cruise with that, cat food. Right? But this transformed the whole way that women thought of themselves. And so, for example, they started demanding that the vows were changed, marriage vows were changed, because they were, you know, so that they weren't so brutal towards women. And this sort of came over here as well. There was a book over here called The Vindication of the Rights of Woman. Mary Shelley, as mum, Mary Shelley's mum wrote that. And she wrote this book, which was full of incredible stuff for the time. Like, it said that even little kids, we think that they're so different because they're boys and girls, but it's because we treat them differently. I mean, it's a radical thing to say now, but in the 1790s, because we treat them so differently, she said. So, like, she said, because of the dolls we give them. For example, you know, we give a little girl a little doll and we put it in a buggy and we go, oh, she's such a little girly, pushing a little dolly in a buggy. Meanwhile, the boy's playing with My First Ethnic Cleanser or something. buggy, and little dolly with it. She's such a mumsy. You think, oh, of course, it's the wheels that are interesting her, isn't it? The wheels, not the maternally bit, is it? The fucking wheels, for Christ's sake. She's not thinking, oh, well, I better get in practice. I live in Plumstead, so it won't be long now. It's the fucking wheels. So, then the most extraordinary event took place, which involved the king and queen trying to escape from this place that they were in, there, from their palace, in order to try and form a load of armies, royal armies, and come back and invade their own country. And they escaped as Russians, right, dressed as Russians in the night. And it was their bad luck that they got as far as this town called Saint-Minol, and there was a guy who was the postmaster called Drouet, and he had to sort of look inside there and check their papers. And he had a look inside and he went, go on then. And he went back and said to his mate, you know, I know you're going to think I'm mad. I think that was the royal family dressed as Russians. What? Can't be. And they sat for ages discussing it. And then one of them held up, he wrote this in his memoirs, right? They wrote up, they held up, the only way they could check it, because there was no Heat magazine, was there, or anything, right? So they had to hold up banknotes to the candlelight. And they just, is that him? Was it? Was it him? Was it? And then it was, they convinced it was definitely them. So they both got on horseback and they went galloping after the royal family dressed as Russians, and they overtook them, and they got to this village called Varennes. And it was late at night now. The only place that was left open at all was this bar that was doing a late lock-in, right? So they went in there and they said, you'd never guess who's up just back there, the other side of the bridge. You never guess, the royal family dressed as Russians. They must be trying to escape and form an army. And it was their brilliant luck that the one place open was somewhere doing a late lock-in, because that's the one place you could go in and tell that story and people go, well, fuck it, let's go and get them then. Fucking royal Russian fucking. So people got all sorts of bits of furniture and anything they could, and they put it on the bridge that went through the village, and the royal family then was stopped, and still nobody quite could work out whether it was the royal family. And meanwhile, Drouet and his mate went round with a bell, waking up all the peasants in all the nearby villages. And after a few hours, apparently, there was 5,000 of these peasants that had come out because of all this. At which point, Drouet must have been thinking, I bloody hope I'm right here. But he was right, it was them, and they were arrested and they were sent. They were still allowed to be king and queen, but they were sent back to Paris. And this was the point now where it all started to change and where people started to think, well, oh, you king and queen, maybe we'd be better off without you. This was the first point, really, at which people were thinking that, especially as various armies from around Europe, including the British Army, Navy, started attacking France in order to try and put down the revolution there. And all these people were were urging Prime Minister Pitt in this country with all these letters, especially lots of these people who'd run away from France. They were urging Pitt, you have to go over there and sort this nonsense out. It's absolutely ridiculous that these madmen are running the place, and I can assure you there's just a... You're right. I'm a bit jittery if ever there's a bang, because I think it's that fucking thing about the land on... That, of course, you'd all think, oh, I wonder how he did that, and his head actually rolled off the stage. Oh, well, blimey, how he must stick it all back together again for next. Maybe he got it off Paul Daniels. But all of these people were writing these sort of letters to Prime Minister Pitt. I can assure you there's just a handful of insurgents. They will welcome us as liberators. They're making pikes of mass destruction. It's absolutely imperative that we go over there. And so then they did, in fact, go over there and try to invade this place. The Duke of Brunswick who was the head of the army from Prussia, he issued a declaration to the people of France. He said, anyone who may dare to defend themselves against the troops of their imperial and royal majesties will find their houses pulled down and burnt. The town of Paris and all its inhabitants without distinction shall be bound to submit on the spot, and without any delay, to the king. The royal family must be restored to the respect to which the laws of nature entitle sovereigns. Otherwise, an exemplary and never to be forgotten vengeance will be taken, and the town of Paris given up to military execution. And people must have been absolutely crapping themselves at this point, because this guy got 3 days march away with his army from Paris. People must have been terrified at this point, and they got any bits and pieces of things that they could gather together in order to try and keep some sort of army going, the people of Paris, and they went out to meet him. And the people were stunned. The Duke of Brunswick was stunned that it wasn't just a handful of insurgents, and that there was a lot more, that it seemed to be popular, this revolution, with lots of people who were prepared to come out and have a go at him. And it's so extraordinarily uncanny how similar it is to now. It's so uncanny. Well, we get there and we find that they don't like us occupying their country and invading everything and taking all their oil. I mean, who could have anticipated such an outcome?